to On the Table, a podcast about board games, card games, and tabletop war games.
Welcome back to episode 118 of the On the Table Gaming Podcast. And today we're catching up with Mike Meeple, and you might know him as one of the OG A Song of Ice and Fire content creators. And then afterwards, we'll be focusing on House Greyjoy in our A Song of Ice and Fire Coach's Corner with Brett Lanpher. And so, Mike Meeple, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. Welcome back on the podcast.
Pleasure to be back, Chase. It's been a long time.
I know. So, you like I said, you were one of the OG content creators. You're like one of the first people. I remember when the Kickstarter was going on and it started to launch, and I started to see your painting tutorials pick up. I've been getting a lot of painting in recently.
You know, not as much as I'd like to, if I'm being completely honest. And people who are subscribing on the channel, on my channel can kind of see it. It's been a little few and far between. My family's been sick, and I work in healthcare, so that's been taking a lot of my time too. But things are starting to calm down again. I'm finally able to get back on the painting table and working on some models. So it's been nice getting back to it.
Well, I always eagerly await, especially I love your blog content, but especially your YouTube channel, which if you haven't checked out, be sure to check out. I think you've got just a great cinematography, obviously great painting skills, and then you've got great sense of just general film overall, like your audio, your visuals. It's super clear, and I just really love your tutorials. So I'm excited for maybe what's in store, and we'll cycle around back to that in a little bit.
Sure.
But it's been a crazy time here since the Kickstarter. It's been a couple of years, and one of those years was the full on COVID, and now things are still kind of crazy with swells and things. Have you been able to get playing any games, A Song of Ice and Fire or others? Or are there games that have been catching your eye?
I just haven't gotten back out there in terms of A Song of Ice and Fire. I really want to, though. And I just finished ordering like all of my update packs, the card packs. So I'm eagerly awaiting those. If I were to play now, obviously I would probably just play Greyjoy because they are already updated. But I was pretty lucky in that my regular gaming group, once we all got vaccinated, we all kind of said, all right, we're gonna start meeting up again. And they don't necessarily play the war games so much, but they really like the board games. So playing lots of Marvel United, which is a great game, playing a little bit of Imperial Assault, went back to that.
Oh my gosh, a classic there.
Yeah, exactly. And then my buddy Garth, he's one of my best friends. He only comes into town for the holidays, and again, I hadn't seen him since Christmas 2019, right? So he came into town, and he came over just the other day, and we were able to get in the game that we always play when he's in town, and he's like the only one that plays it with me, is Mechs versus Minions.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
you actually talked to me about that one too. I did take a look at it. It's so funny hearing your experience about with your buddy there. Is that my buddy Brian the Builder, who works on A Song of Ice and Fire Builder? It's the same thing. I really only see him every year around the holidays when he comes back in to visit his folks who I live near. And one of the games he's been super into and wanting me to get into is Monsterpocalypse. And so I'm thinking, he's coming up for the holidays, the winter season here, and it's either I try and get him to play A Song of Ice and Fire, or he's going to try and get me to play some Monsterpoc. He's got some old miniatures and stuff for that. And, I've been looking at it. It looks kind of interesting, and I might give it a shot. Have you had any experience with that game?
Let me tell you, I am super excited about that game. I'm in the Kickstarter for a chunk of money that I will not disclose in case my wife hears this. I'm super excited about that game. I got the chance to play it, the Tabletopia version of it, which is the quote unquote official version, and it's pretty much playable. There's still some glitches with a few things here and there, but you definitely get the idea. And man, that is a cool game, a really cool game. And Mythic Games has they're doing it with Privateer Press. It's a co-production, and they have such great quality to their games. The minis for Reichbusters, the components for Reichbusters, and Super Fantasy Brawl, which I loved. These were all great components and great production value. But Reichbusters and some of their other games like Joan of Arc weren't the best in terms of clarity, and even Super Fantasy Brawl that I love is kind of complicated, and there's a lot of extra stuff that I don't necessarily think needs to be in there to play the game. But with Privateer Press being the game coming from them, and then Mythic Games kind of handling the components, I think I just got really excited. It's a match made in heaven, I think.
Man, between you and, because I remember you mentioning before talking about the Kickstarter, that's why I kind of also brought it up here. Sure. Between you and Kevin from 3 Men in a War Game, because my buddy loves this game so much too, like I might want to get into this. It might be something I check out. So maybe I can grab the three of you together sometime, maybe even offline or online, to talk to me, like give me the whole rundown of this game, because it certainly caught my attention. And my buddy Brian is like, he loves like those kind of kaiju, like big monster movies and games. Sure. And this goes back to like the stuff we used to go over his house in like middle school and watch, like Godzilla movies.
Yeah.
So it can be pretty cool. Are you going to be making some painting tutorials for this game? Because that's something that would be helpful if I did get into it.
Yeah, that's the goal. And I'll be honest with you. I joined the Monsterpocalypse Facebook community, and it kind of reminds me like old school Song of Ice and Fire community, where it's not too big, but it's big enough, and like I kind of posed the question on the Facebook group. I was like, hey, do you feel like painting tutorials for this game would be helpful? Do you think that, it's an oversaturated market? What do you guys think? And they said, no, absolutely. Please do that. There's not enough coverage for this game. It's a great game, sort of a thing. And I even got, I discovered I even got the marketing guy from Mythic Games to comment on that post. And he said, please do that. That would be that would be awesome.
But it's kind of funny how it's like, as a and I think that's true with anything. Like that's part of the growing process. Sure. It's always fun to be a part of the ride at something in the beginning as well. Ice and Fire too. I do want to check out tutorials. And on my con, they have they showcase the Lannister starter set. It's a standalone, and the Stark starter set. So it made me think about your old blog tutorials here. As things are picking up again, I know you got your card packs coming. Is that something you might be jumping back into? I saw a teaser post on Facebook that you've got maybe some Stark stuff in the works.
Yeah, and I kind of went back and I started taking a look at some of my older tutorials for a few reasons. Obviously, I've grown as a painter, right? And I would like to think that my audience has grown as painters as well. So maybe looking at some new techniques and some new methods might really help raise the quality of some of my audience's paint jobs as well.
Well, man, I know, especially your Victorian Greyjoy one, that was a somewhat more recent one. Man, that is absolutely fantastic, and that's what I've been using as my basis for me going through my Greyjoy. So I know I absolutely big fan of your stuff, and as you know, I have been for a long time. Sure. And so it looks like you're doing some Stark stuff coming up then?
Yes. I probably tonight I will be recording the voiceover for my new Sword and Swords tutorial. And this should take me a few days to edit. So by the time you guys hear this out there in podcast world, the tutorial should either have just dropped or will be dropping in the next few days or so.
Now the pressure's on here. I got to race in the end. Make sure I get this ready to go. Well, that's fantastic. And the fun thing is, it's like, I guess one thing I always think about is like, there's people I know that have been a big part of the Song of Ice and Fire community that have then left and then come back, or tried other games, or maybe a Song of Ice and Fire has become like a side game and they have another main game, or and it's I guess I guess originally it was like, oh man, I got to be so attached. But I was like, these things can kind of like ebb and flow.
Sure.
And the cool thing about especially a Song of Ice and Fire is it's like, it's really well established now. The game's doing really well, despite, COVID and all these challenges. The 2021 update had some, distribution challenges and obstacles. Like, It's definitely like one of those rocks. It's like, okay, this game is like definitely here to stay. I remember when we first we were starting and first like kind of connecting, it was like pre Night's Watch being a faction. And it was like, what do we do to help this game grow? Because like we wanted to be around here. Like, will this game be successful? And it definitely showed it has legs.
I remember that first Christmas season where there was no information. We got nothing, and everyone was like, "Oh no, what's happening with this game?"
I feel bad because sometimes people get like worked up about certain things like delays in shipping, and I just think back to like those early times like that when it was like it was like the first December and there was no news because I think they like cmon like kind of takes like December off ish.
Yeah.
People were like calling it like the long night. It was like the like it's like there's been 4 weeks of no information. It's like things we just needed some perspective, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad to see you coming back and doing some painting, and hope we get some games going soon. And let's do that. Let's set maybe a time in the future. Maybe we could talk a little bit more about Monsterpoc. And maybe we can gather. I'll get some like show notes ready, and we can get into a deep dive on that.
Sure.
And in the meantime, I'm just excited to kind of see some of your more painting tutorials coming out, and it was just kind of a chance to kind of connect and see what you're up to these days. And just great to catch up again.
Yeah, for sure.
What's the best place to find you on the interwebs?
So you can actually just Google Mike Meeple. That will take you to both my blog and my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is youtube.com/Mike Meeple, and then my blog is mikemeeple.blogspot.com. But either one of those, just like I said, the easiest way is just Google Mike Meeple, and I'll be like one of the first two things. I'm usually the first thing or the first two things that pop up. Which I think is, I don't know. I feel kind of proud about that.
You are the Mike Meeple.
I know. Although I saw some guy online the other day that was posting under Meeple Mike, and he even had like the bright green Meeple with a mustache and everything. I was like, what the heck? Who are you?
Your doppelganger.
It was like Bizarro me. It was horrible.
Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery or something.
Sure.
But I don't know. There's only one Mike Meeple, and you're it. Well, kind of a casual just conversation and catching up, and I'm excited that you're back to making the Song of Ice and Fire tutorials. I'm really excited to hear about your exploits getting back into playing the game with 2021. And so you're saying you might be doing Greyjoy if you started playing again now. What about the Targaryens? That was the last one you were playing. I know that they're coming out pretty strong these days. I've been having a lot of fun. We did a coach's corner with a Targaryen gun list that you might get a kick out of. Some things for you to think about.
Yeah. I heard that. So I mean, still, and I'm gonna catch heat for this, I'm sure, because they are online everybody's hated faction right now. I'm still Night's Watch. I
was trying to subtly lead you away from the Night's Watch.
Jon Snow's still my boy. He's still my boy. He's my favorite character in the books and the show. He's all of that stuff. I really was enjoying playing as the Targaryens though. Before everything shut down, just because they're so different than anything else. But I want to try my Greyjoys. I haven't even played it with them. I have the set, but I haven't even busted it open. So,
oh man,
other than to paint Victarion,
Yeah. Well, we got to remedy that. So that's gonna be on our list too for future things. We got to get you some games,
for sure,
and then we'll talk about some other games as well here.
Yeah.
But no pressure though.
Well, one game that I am excited about that I didn't think that I was going to be too excited about is the Marvel Zombicide.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I'm glad you brought that up. I'm kind of just a wee bit excited about that. So there's a few things, and I do want to let you talk and hear what your thoughts are.
Sure.
But one of the cool things about that is Michael Chanel and Fabio Curry's, they're both designing that game, and Fabio's first designer credit. Obviously, we've had them on the podcast in the past. We've got to know them pretty well through A Song of Ice and Fire. So that's like fantastic in its own self right there. I'm just so excited for Fabio to get his designer credit with a game like this, which is huge. Their 50th Kickstarter.
Sure.
But man, I don't know about you, but Zombicide's a game I've had a lot of fun with in a very casual, like bringing lots of friends together sort of setting. And I think the Marvel theme on that is just like a home run.
Oh yeah, so the very first like big box like nerd game that I ever bought that wasn't like Settlers of Catan, right? Was Zombicide. I bought it at the local game store, Crazy Squirrel Games, and I bought the very first version of Zombicide, and it was fine. Right? Like, it was a fine game. It was a lot of fun, but there were still some things where I was like, oh man, I don't know, like some of this stuff, like I have to shoot my friends before I shoot the zombies. You know, certain little design choices were a little funky. And then I got Black Plague. And
yes.
Yep. And Black Plague fixed everything, and the theme fit like it was perfect. Everything, it was like the perfect version of Zombicide, you know. And I love that game. And I played the snot out of that. And then I went, because I'm a sucker for cowboys and Indians and Wild West and monsters and in the Wild West, I went all in on the Undead or Alive, which you know, I mean, come on, like come on,
literally,
Cowboys versus zombies. That's a great. Take my money now. You know.
Oh my gosh, is that like a generational thing? Like, are Cowboys, you know, is Western style as popular now with like younger generations? Maybe it's my grandfather. I guess my mom, my grandfather, and my mother were super into Westerns. Like, I think that was how she bonded with her dad. Watching those, it sounds like a love she had and kind of passed on to me. But yeah, there's so many of those things. I was looking at those, I was like, oh man, this is really cool.
Yeah, well, and for me, I was like, okay, so I've got Black Plague. I'm gonna get all in. You know, I'm getting all in Undead or Alive. And I heard that the announcement was Zombicide for their 50th, and I thought to myself, do I really need another Zombicide game? Because I passed on Invader, right? I skipped Invader. I skipped Green Horde, even though there was some really cool stuff in Green Horde that I wanted, and I even skipped Second Edition. You know, the Second Edition Modern, but I was like, do I really need another Zombicide? But after listening to your podcast, actually, which is kind of why I brought up the talking about Marvel Zombies, listening to your podcast and listening to the Q&A that they did when they announced it, when Fabio and Michael were on Facebook and whatnot, I'm really intrigued, and I'm excited. The fact that you're playing as the zombies, the fact that there's this, as they said it, the hunger meter, you know, that risk reward where, you know, if you you can eat a lot of you can eat people, and then if you don't eat enough people, then you become crazy, sort of a thing. There's a lot of cool stuff in there that I'm like, oh, this sounds cool. You know, and this sounds different.
Right. That's what I'm excited about, is that, you know, I've played Zombicide, and, you know, bringing Michael and Fabio on board, when traditionally it's more of kind of like a Guillotine Games design. And, you know, they're working with the framework of that, and it's just going to be cool to see how they iterate on that and maybe bring a fresh take or expand on some of the solid foundations that game has. I think that is what I'm looking forward to the most, is like, how else can this game be played? Because, you know, I played a lot of Zombicide, and it's fun to see like the variations on the theme, but it is also interesting to see like the whole concept flipped, right? Where it's like, wait, we're the zombies? Like, or were the infected? Like, that's really appeling.
Yeah.
Plus, it's like, how many cool minis? Like, I want cool minis, and like cool minis of superheroes. Like, sure, I'll take them.
Well, one of the, I mean, you've seen all the Kickstarters, right, for Zombicide. One of the big running gags that they always have are like these cameos, right, where they have these people that are like celebrities that or other characters from other movies that pop up into Zombicide as, you know, different, you know, as named something else, but their backstory is exactly what you'd expect, sort of a thing. And I'm sitting back and I'm like, I don't think they need to do that with the Marvel Zombies. They probably just pull from the Marvel encyclopedia, you know?
Oh yeah. Well, that's why I do think there's going to probably be some grumpy fans when, like, because they can't put everything, right? How many Marvel characters are there? There's, you know, hundreds and hundreds. Like,
oh man.
And I remember for the He-Man Kickstarter, there was a little bit of people getting grumpy when I think it was Jitsu, which was a kind of a questionable He-Man character anyway, like didn't make the cut.
Sure.
And for Marvel, there's going to be somebody out there that's like, this one particular small time hero is like, I've got a tattoo and I've got all the comics for, and how could it not make it? But
how dare Howard the Duck not make it into Marvel?
Yeah. How did Duck? I could see him making the cut though. Like he seems like he's like weird enough in a popular way. Like, but I don't know. But I still at the same time, with that one caveat, I think there's going to be a lot of really excited and happy fans, and I'm just kind of excited to see like what these iterations look like. I won't lie. I like only recently came into the Marvel Zombies comic books. So I've been trying to like read through theirs and catch up on those, and shout out to the folks at Sarge's Comics in New London, Connecticut for hooking me up with that and helping me know what the heck is going on here, because I only really knew it from the Disney Plus series, and I was like, like zombies, and now I'm like, there's a whole comic. Okay, let's do it.
Yeah, no, it's been around for a long time.
It's like 15 years old. I was like, oh man. Yeah.
Well, I remember they actually debuted in Ultimate Fantastic Four. And I remember I was subscribed to Ultimate Fantastic Four, and I got that from our local comic shop. Shout out to Heroes Comics and Cards in Fresno, California. Woot. Hey, Dave. And I remember reading that, and it's the fake out. I don't know if you've read that part, but it's the fake out where the Ultimate version of Reed Richards thinks he's talking with the mainstream of, Reed Richards, and then he goes and travels to their world and discovers that it's actually he's been talking to the zombie version, Mm-hmm. So it's like, I remember reading that. I remember feeling so fresh and so new and a different take on zombies, and it still just informs so much about what we think of when we think of kind of the Marvel zombie universe. Like it's still got that humor to it, that macabre, like dark, grim, gallows humor sort of a thing.
And this is like kind of insider information maybe, but like knowing Michael, having gotten to know Michael Chanel's personality, and then Fabio's kind of more lighthearted pun-based personality, I'm like, oh my gosh, together they can really do this well, I bet. So I think I have a lot of faith in those two, and so I'm really excited to see what comes of it. So, I'm looking forward to covering it, and I'm gonna go all in on it. And then once it comes out, I'll sit down and maybe take a look, and we'll do like a real review of everything and see, where do they hit the mark, where could things been improved. But for now, full disclosure, I'm just excited, and the possibility and the exploration of that stuff is like, I'm excited to be immersed in all of that.
Yeah. I will probably not do all in unless they really got some good stuff. But
I may not get that. I'm not going to get that Galactus statue. I think
that's what I mean.
That might be, might be
a little much. I mean, I would love to, but it'll probably be a healthy pledge from me. But I doubt I'll be able to do all in. So,
but. I'm expecting to see some paint tutorials on that. So no pressure.
There are some Marvel tutorials already up that I think might have some crossover potential on my website. But
from an alternate universe,
an alternate universe where everyone's still okay and the models are overpriced.
Oh my gosh, how much is that going to be a thing, right? Like, think how many superhero miniatures you're going to get at a relatively a lower price than some other superhero miniatures you can get
for the price of one expansion.
But superheroes, you got some people I know they got to catch them all. So
I know
another fun thing to go with. Well, I'm looking forward to that for sure. And, I hope you get some of your Song of Ice and Fire stuff out on the table. Maybe get some Greyjoys on, which kind of segues into our next segment here. We're going to be talking with Brett Lanpher in our Coach's Corner about getting the most out of a combination of some of the newer Greyjoy units. So maybe that's something that you can catch up on and use to help inspire some of the lists that you can come back to running.
For sure.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on, and always great to catch up with you.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Chase.
All right, now we're going to switch on over to the Coach's Corner. I'm here with Brett Lanpher with another Coach's Corner. And Brett, so, container ships have begun hitting the shores of the U.S. And along with those boats, we've had some Greyjoys arriving. So I hear you're going to be talking a little about that today?
Yeah, I think it's probably a little bit overdue for you and I to talk about Greyjoys. They're so similar to the faction that you hold dearest to your heart, the Free Folk. The playstyle's not incredibly unsimilar. The Greyjoys just do some other things additionally. They don't have the massive punch combos that the Free Folk do, but they do have some serious resilience by way of healing. And I can't tell you how excited I am for these heroes that have been shown in the Heroes box too. I think there are some serious gems in here, and I couldn't wait to build a list, and now I can't wait to talk about it.
Well, so, I'm in a weird spot where I've got a lot of people I know that are really into Greyjoys, and I've been slowly building up a collection, but I've been mostly lending it out to other people to play. And so I've played into Greyjoy quite a few times, but, I haven't been piloting them myself a lot. So, what might be a kind of a cool list for me to take and hit the table with that maybe makes use of some of the new stuff coming out, so I can kind of razzle dazzle a little bit?
Yeah, I'm going to go down just the units, and I'm going to briefly tell you what their role is in the list, and then we'll go a little bit more in depth if you'd like with some of the synergies and some of the combinations.
100%. The more you can hold my hand through it, the better.
All right. So immediately, when we talked with Simon and we were talking about the CMon Expo, I was in love with Silenced Men as soon as they were revealed. So if I was playing Greyjoys, I would want to play Silenced Men. I love everything about the mechanic. The only problem that you can run into with Silenced Men, they have a fairly elite morale value at 5, but their armor is also a 5. So the trouble with them is kind of keeping them alive. They've definitely got the offensive punch. They get pillage tokens and they can resist panic. They just can't resist a large volume of attack. So just coincidentally, we just saw Baelor Blacktide, who has Hardened. And as we know, Hardened is arguably the best defensive ability in the entire game right now. It's such a good ability. People are trying to include it in their lists wherever they can. This is going to make something, even with a 5+ defensive save, surprisingly resilient.
And Harden's the one where you get +1 blocked hit, and for each destroyed rank you have, you get an additional +1 hit block.
Yep, that's correct. So, and the thing that really puts Hardened over the top is that you block those hits after you roll defense die. So you've got a chance to squeeze a couple of defensive saves in, and if you fail, 2 or 3 of them, depending on what your ranks are, you could just end up blocking everything from the attack. It makes it really, really hard to push through them, even if you're throwing multiple attacks at them.
So that makes a great bunker unit. And the Silenced Men, they are also, with that, their silence is infamy, with that short range, like negative morale debuff. You can maybe then play them a little bit more centrally.
Yes, you can play them centrally, you can play them aggressively, and built in with that offensive potential, you've got the ability to reduce the amount that you take from failing panic based on the number of pillage tokens you have. And then additionally, Baelor has his Order to the Last, which we've seen from Great John Umber and we've seen from Corrin Halfhand. This is if you would be destroyed, you take a morale test. On a success, you're not destroyed, you remain in play with 1 wound, and then you become panicked and vulnerable. Now, this goes hand in hand with the Greyjoy's basic deck card, What is Dead May Never Die. Obviously, you can't play them both at the same time because one's a card and one's an order, but you've effectively got a lot of chances to keep this guy alive. It's really, really nice.
So that's fantastic. That's kind of your anchor piece then for this list. What are you filling out around it?
Okay, so I've got 2 units of Greyjoy archers. The reason for that, number one, ranged in the current meta is really, really good. And Greyjoys have a 4-point long-ranged unit. They've also got the ability to re-roll when they're in the flank. Even without that ability, just being able to shoot from 12 inches is phenomenal. I've got these guys in there, but I'm really hoping that I can pair that with that Silenced Men, what I call the bubble of trouble. So if you can shoot into the combat that the Silenced Men are in, or if you can shoot into something that's close to the Silenced Men, you're essentially shooting with Vicious if you think about it, because they're going to be at a -1 or a -2 to their morale test. You can just chip away with 1 or 2 wounds from the shot, and then you're doubling down on that panic damage because now you've got a modifier. So it can actually get really nasty, especially if you've got 2 of those archers.
Is the divide the spoils an essential part here for getting those Silenced Men like loaded up early?
I think it's a really, really good way to do it. And again, touching on what you see in the meta, you see a lot of units like Poor Fellows, you see units like Free Folk Raiders. On the Greyjoy side, you see enemy archers, you see enemy reavers. These things are easy to shoot and take a rank off of, and then you're just buffing up your Silence Men, and the Silence Men really don't have to do anything. But the Silence Men are absolutely capable of getting their own pillage token because their Great X's have Sundering, and they're just going to go in there and, you know, hopefully take out at least one rank with an attack. So these guys should have their pillage tokens early, and they should have plenty of them.
So we got Silence Men with Baelor Blacktide. We've got 2 units of Ironborn Bowman. So that's giving us about 15 points here. That's a nice symmetrical looking force. How are we rounding this out?
We've got 1 unit of Reavers. They're the basic house troop. Just in general, when I build a list for any faction, I'm including one of the quote unquote house troop. Their basic 5-point troop. Greyjoys just happen to have a really, really, really good one. So I like these guys in the list. They're adding a little bit of extra damage, and they're getting stronger and stronger as you get those pillage tokens on. But more importantly, you're kind of creating a target saturation situation here because you want to get rid of the archers. You have to do something about the Silenced Men, not only because of their attack and the commander being in there, but the bubble of trouble. You've got to get rid of that. And so you might end up letting the Reavers kind of slip through the cracks, and they're going to do a lot of damage.
And, what else are you thinking for combat troops then? You've got a pretty good force there. Are you going to throw anything else in the mix to mix it up?
Yes, this is the tech piece specifically built for this list, specifically built to synergize with the archers, with the Silenced Men. This is kind of the piece that's going to tie everything together. I've got a unit of Blackguard, and they have the Bolton Flayer in them. Now, this is a 7-point combination. You don't see it a whole lot, but I think a lot of people probably want to if they can. But the reason this combo is so nasty is because if you spread fear and the Blackguard are at full ranks, which is pretty reasonable, they're a 3+ defense and a 6+ morale. That spread fear is a -3 with a +1 wound kick. If you're spreading fear inside the bubble of trouble, that's a -5 with a +1 wound kicker. That is nasty. That's where you start to see elite units and even specialists like Poor Fellows start to fail panic tests. A -5 modifier is huge. Additionally, the Blackguard have Vicious, but their attack profile is not super stout. But if you can stack Vicious with the Silence Men bubble, you're looking at a Vicious at -4, and so they can trigger their own spread fear by making you fail that first panic test. Then they're popping another one at -5. It can get really, really nasty.
And that's not even talking about their Horrific Visage.
Exactly, and Horrific Visage, they're just if you're inside that aura, I think it creates a situation where it's just detrimental for you to even attack the Black. You don't even want to go after them. So I'm using that aura to create that kind of -4 Vicious with the threat of spread fear to try to force you to attack the Blackguard. So I've got 5 units on the field that I feel like you have to do something about all of them, but I think I can put you in some situations where you're making some really bad choices and something's going to get through and it's probably going to damage you pretty significantly.
Man, and then, you've still got, your Lash Out command cards, Black Tide's Resentment, Black Tide Conviction. There's a lot of things you can do to work with this. Actually, I kind of like this list. I might try and bust this one out. I had so much fun with the Lannister gun list. So I feel like I'm just like rolling up a flavor of the podcast every time I play now. People are like, oh boy.
Oh, so that's fine. I think this list is going to be tons of fun, and we haven't even talked about the NCU tech. But if you want to talk about his cards really quickly, we can talk about even more synergies that we have. So you've already got the Blackguard who are punishing you essentially for attacking them, and they could be double punishing you because of that spread fear order. But as you mentioned, you have Lash Out, which is going to do 2 wounds to you after you make an attack on them. Somebody engaged with them is getting 2 wounds for each destroyed rank, and then if they're attacking Baelor's unit, they're going to become vulnerable as well. That's a really, really nasty retribution attack. And if they're foolish enough to go after the Blackguard thinking that they can do a lot of damage, and maybe they do, but they're taking the Horrific Visage first, potentially at -5, and then they could be getting a Lash Out for additional wounds and then becoming vulnerable on top of it. It's going to be a pretty punishing attack for them attacking them. And anytime you can do damage out of turn, it's awesome, particularly when we're talking about automatic wounds. But it doesn't necessarily end there, because the synergy works really well because you have Black Tide Conviction, and I'm assuming that you're shooting these archers into melee at some point. I personally want to be shooting into the blackguard or into the silence men. And if you manage to fail one of the panic tests for shooting, the friendly fire panic test, Black Tide Conviction, when you're performing a morale test after rolling dice, so you get to see that you fail, then you play this card, you're going to get a +1 to the roll for each of the destroyed ranks in the unit that's taking the test, but then you're going to get an additional +1 for each destroyed rank among all of the enemies they're engaged. So this card, in a way, is a deterrent for them kind of jumping on you with multiple units, because if they've started to lose ranks, this could get up to a +6. I mean, that's the perfect situation. Realistically, you're probably going to be seeing, +3, +4, but that's really, 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 really good on a morale test. So that's helping these guys stick around.
You're just firing away at them.
It has a perfect synergy with an NCU that we're going to go into here in a second after we talk about Black Tide Resentment. This is another one of those cards that you're getting out of your hand quickly. It's a card that you don't have to hold on to for the situation. You're attaching this to a friendly combat unit, and you're removing it if they ever restore wounds. So I'm thinking that I like this one on the Blackguard in particular. When this unit is performing a melee attack for each of its destroyed ranks, you can take +1 to hit and +1 attack die for each destroyed rank, and then you can gain Vicious, and if the defender fails their panic test, they suffer +1 wound for each of this unit's destroyed ranks. I like this on the Blackguard because they're defensive enough that I'm not overly worried about healing them, and I can start to really use that -4 to start adding additional wounds, and I can let my Blackguard hit on 3s instead of 4s, and that's giving them a little bit of teeth. So I really, really like this card with that Blackguard.
Oh my God, and even as they start to get worn down and start to lose ranks, the additional wounds, that's beastly. So you've got 5 combat units here. Is this a list you're going to run with 3 NCUs or 2? I guess with points it's going to be 3, I guess, now that I do the math. But
well, we could be doing 2 if you went with really expensive NCUs, I guess. I guess you'd be leaving some points on the table, but I'm running 3 in this particular list. I'm starting off with Windermere. I just think Windermere is a fantastic NCU. I've loved him since we saw the Greyjoys revealed. I really latched onto this guy because he reminds me so much of Craster in 1.6.
Little free folk vibe, yeah.
The free folk vibe, because he's the same for free folk in in the 2021. He's a little bit different for Night's Watch. He does the same thing for free folk, but I loved him in 1.6. Zone replacement to heal 2 wounds and draw a tactics card is just so good. It gives you it gives you half benefits from 2 of the better zones, the tactics zone and the wealth zone. So I really like that. But additionally, Windermere's got this shift. So at the start of a friendly turn, you can remove the token, and a friendly combat unit can perform a 3-inch shift. So the way that you can use this is you can play really cheeky with your archers. You can keep them out of range of enemy archers, and then after the enemy archers activate and they weren't able to attack you, you can shift 3 inches and then shift 2 more inches and shift yourself into range. So you can create a situation where they can't shoot you, but you can shoot them. But additionally, I like that shift because the Blackguard are a little bit slow. Ideally, I would be using this to get the Blackguard into the combat, get them engaged, and then you're forcing them to either sit there and get punched, or they're going to have to attack you back and deal with the horrific visage, or they're retreating. I love all of those options if I'm the Greyjoy player. You're either sitting there letting me punch on you, and you're doing nothing. You're retreating and not attacking me. I'm fine with that. Or you're just attacking me, and you're taking those panic tests at -3 or more.
Man, I totally get the Craster, the old free folk Craster comparison. One thing that I haven't actually played Windermere yet, and the whole place 1 order token on him. So he starts with 1 order token, and you use it to do his cool effects. And, is there a rhythm or a strategy you like to employ with him for reclaiming tokens? Do you try and stack him on early, or do you just kind of think of him as a one-off guy? What's your general philosophy behind him?
With him, again, I'm treating him exactly as I treated Craster in 1.6. And when I used Craster in 1.6, more often than not, I used his zone replacement effect to heal 2 and draw the card because I think that benefit is really good. Windermere is actually a little bit more flexible than Craster because you don't have to use that right away, and you can use it multiple times in a round. So generally in round 1, where the combat zone and the crown are kind of just formalities, they're not super popular, I'm almost always going to replace one of those zones and get a Windermere token in round 1. Now I have 2 tokens. From there, you end up in this situation a lot where your opponent's playing the board, you know, the start of the round, they're rushing to the tactics board to get their zones resolved because that's all the free stuff. And then a lot of times you're ending up with like the maneuver zone. And it's like, well, I really don't need to do a maneuver zone. I could, or I can go grab a Windermere token. And it's the same with the Crown. When they don't have cards like Hear Me Roar, there's too many, it's not necessarily the best play to go for the Crown. So I would be happy to just go grab a Windermere token, particularly if I had something in mind for later in that round and I wanted that shift to get closer to an objective, if I wanted to get my archers in range, or again, if I wanted to get my blackguard back into the fight. So it's very situational, but there's almost no instance in round 1 where I'm not putting a token on. So then I have 2 to use between round 2 and 6. That's usually enough. If you can get 3 or 4 throughout the course of the game, Windermere is doing a lot of work for you at that point.
Coming from the lens of Free Folk, I feel like he's a really appealing NCU. I wonder if others think the same, but it seems like a lot at potential there. So who are you pairing up with him?
The next NCU, this is one of the guys from the new Heroes box. This is an NCU, I think at first glance, some people might overlook him. I think he's phenomenal. I'm looking at Christopher Botley. I like control aspects in this game. I like trickery. I like things of this nature. His Ironborn diplomat ability is very, very, very unique. And I think that it is a tempo stealing ability. So once per game, at the start of any round, you select one tactic zone. If you do, that zone may not be claimed this round. So you're thinking at first glance, maybe, well, my opponent can't claim it, but I can't claim it either. But how I'm using him is in either round 2 or 3. Those are the biggest tempo rounds where the first claim is to the combat zone to make a free attack to start that round, particularly with your heavy hitter. Say if you're going first in round 2 and we're engaged, it could even be round 4, doesn't matter. Round 2, 3, 4, whatever the round is, everything's locked up. The engagement's happened. Now at this point, we're really, really waiting to see who's going to get the kill and kind of swing the battle. You're almost always relying on taking the combat zone, particularly in 2021, because Varys doesn't exist to take that away from you. So your battle plan relies on you getting that free attack. If I mark the combat zone and you can't take it, that's probably 3 rounds in a row that you have been denied a free attack off of the tactics board. That's huge in terms of tempo.
There's a lot to like there at 4 points, man. And he's got other options too on this Ironborn diplomat ability.
Absolutely. And the other benefit is 3 NCU is very, very popular in casual and tournament type of meta. The other thing that you're doing, not only are you denying them the combat zone, which you could flex to the wealth zone. If you're expecting a big Amon heal bomb, you could block the wealth zone. But what the other thing that you're doing is you're denying them on their tempo turn, their ability to claim 3 zones to your 2. So if you assume 3 NCU versus 3 NCU, every round somebody isn't getting a tactic zone. If you play the board first on the rounds where you're first player, you're assuming that you're getting benefit out of 3 zones. This prevents you from getting that 3rd zone because you activate an NCU, I activate an NCU, you activate, I activate. Now there's no zone for you to claim because nobody's allowed to take the zone I've marked. So I've stolen your zone that I know you want, and I've screwed with your tempo on the tactics board. I think he's phenomenal.
And not to mention the once per game when an enemy NCU activates, you may select 2 tactic zones. And if they claim that zone as this activation, target 1 enemy combat unit becomes panicked and vulnerable.
And that's going to work really, really well with this panic style, with the silenced men and with the blackguard and the archers, again, pseudo vicious from the silenced men. Those tokens, they're going to really think twice about claiming the zone. They're probably going to claim it because the tactics board is important, but I think you're fine with that because you're putting the panicked and vulnerable tokens, then you're going to be able to take advantage of those.
So, one concern then with this list then is, are you worried about your silenced men? I know they're hardier with hardened, but are you worried about them just getting focused down in alpha and then, breaking your synergy combo here?
I would be, but we've got another new NCU. We've got Baron Blacktie. He has Zeal of the Drowned God. Now, he may only influence Greyjoy units. So in my list, I won't be able to put him on my Blackguard, but I'm fine with that. That's part of the reason that Blackguard is in that list, is because they're defensive enough that they don't have to have his influence. What he's going to do is, while influencing a friendly unit, that unit only suffers 1 wound for every 2 unblocked hits from any attacker effect. Then Baron is removed if that unit ever fails to panic. So you're essentially looking at the giants having wounds, because this one isn't...
Oh my God.
Right. because this one isn't specifically against attack. This is 2 unblocked hits from any attack or effect. Now that's big because there's a lot of things in the game that do auto hits. Those auto hits are generally bypassing resilience as it's worded on units like Stag Knights. This is worded as it is on Giants. So that means any effect that's giving you automatic hits could essentially be halved. That's huge in a game mode like Honed and Ready, where arrows rain down on you. You can essentially block half of those arrows.
Oh my gosh.
Now, the influence comes off if you fail a panic test. That's where we go back to Baron's card. That's potentially going to put you with your Silence Men. If you're taking a panic at +3, +4, it's an auto pass. If they're stacking Lannister modifiers on you, you can essentially counterbalance those modifiers to make it an even panic test at a 5. So that card is really going to help ensure that Baron's influence stays on for multiple attacks. Now,
and with Hardened and that's so many blocks.
I think with Hardened and that, I mean, if we just do some really quick math, if they do 7 hits, you're going to roll 7 defensive dice. I think you need to fail. If you fail 2, Harden or Resilience turns that into 2 wounds. Harden blocks 1. So even if they hit you with 7 and you fail 7, Resilience from the NCU turns that into 3. Harden blocks 1. You took 2 wounds. And that's from an attack where you're assuming they either charged or they played a card to get rerolls or they used to get, like, they put a lot into that attack to give you 7 hits, and you really just shrugged it off. When you're down at the last rank, it's even harder to get those hits through. If you're blocking 3, that means they have to get 8 hits through, and you have to fail every single one before they're even doing 1 wound. Because at 8, even if you block 1, 7 becomes 3 Hardened blocks. It's almost impossible to kill them.
I've seen a lot of people kind of relying on Iron Makers to be their sort of more anvil-y units, and this sort of supplants that. And you don't really need to take that unit with how much they could defend. Wow.
You don't have to. Now, this guy is going to feast against things that don't have Intrigue and Subterfuge, which cancels NCU influences. There's other things that could deter him from going onto the tactics board. Your beautiful Mance with Wildling Diplomacy. Yeah. You know, if he activates and he doesn't claim his own, he doesn't get to put his influence out. So I think Mance kind of has an upper hand in that situation because you almost have to put him on the board because you don't want to waste that influence. Then Mance is giving you D3+1 auto wounds and a condition token. So there's a little bit of counterplay to this guy. But if you're pairing this with a list that accounts for some of those matches that he might not be the best in, then I think this is an excellent list as an all-comer list, and then you've just got to decide on a list that you pair it with. And maybe your other list has the true defense of Iron Makers, and you're running Eric Ironmaker NCU. I think Greyjoys are just so flexible. You can put together some list pairings that really have an answer to it.
Man, stuff like this, even just that, you're talking about Mance and countering Baron, Black Tide here, Blind Baron. That just like sparks that, like, this is what I love about this game. There's so many ways to counter and play or be outplayed. God. All right. Well, this is, I guess, unfortunately, then, folks, next time I go out and I catch a game, maybe I'll be playing Greyjoy here, and I won't be rolling up my free folk because I definitely want to try this.
Yeah, I absolutely want to hear from some people. I think the Blackguard tech piece is one of the things that it might be a little bit tricky to get to work, and you might struggle with when to activate and when to use, but very interested to see how people do with this list. And in particular, I want to hear about how the Blackguard do with that Silence Men aura, how much panic damage you're doing in a game, because I think it can be a lot.
Or conversely, if you guys are dropping this in, we'll do our Make a List Monday. If you maybe get this on the table and you really are having a blast with it, what would you pair with this list? Let us know that as well. What would you do to balance this out if you're coming into a more competitive environment and you're worried about some of the counters to this list? What would you bring along as your secondary list?
Yep. I'd love to hear it too, and I'll get thinking on a list that I would pair with this, and when that drops, I'll drop my 2 cents in on that as well.
I may have to do a Coach's Corner playoff here with the Targ Gunline versus this and see what comes out.
Oh, I think that'd be a really interesting match. That is a lot of ranged attacks, and I think you can kind of work around the army that's not the commander unit. I think that ranged list can pick its targets well enough that you can go pick on whoever doesn't have the Blind Baron on them, and I think you can start picking them off. That would be a really cool match to see. I do want to hear about that, actually.
I've been having so much fun with that list. I've even done some I've played some open matches against some newer players where I've even toned it down a bit, but just wanted to get used to moving things around. But man, in its original form, that is a blast. So I can't wait to try this one out now too. So we'll get this one, check it out. So let us know. Be sure to head on to the On the Table Gaming Facebook group. Let us know your feedback on this list. And Brett, thanks so much for coming on. I'm excited to see to report back how it goes, how this list plays out, and here's some other ideas for next week.
Absolutely. I love these little episodes, and I'm really glad we got to talk about Greyjoys this time.
Thanks again for always stopping by.
Oh yeah, no problem.
Thanks so much for tuning in for this episode, and special thanks to our Patreon supporters for helping make this episode possible. Be sure to head on over to the On the Table Gaming Facebook group, jump in and join the conversation about this Coach's Corner, and in the meantime, we hope you get your miniatures on the table.